I will never forget the afternoon my name became a joke. I, Mary Johnson, 62 years old, mother of an only son, went from being mom to being the ridiculous old lady in front of thousands of strangers. It all started with the sound of the phone. A neighbor called me, her voice choked up, saying my son Andrew had posted something about me online. "It's on TikTok. Mary, please don't look at it," she said. But I saw it, and I wish I hadn't. The video began with him entering my house with a camera in hand without me noticing. I was in the kitchen, humming a tune while stirring a pot of turkey chili. Andrew approached from behind with that smile I had so often mistaken for affection, and began to imitate my voice. "Look at my mom," he said, laughing. "She still thinks she can look good with that 80s hairstyle in her 60s. Ridiculous old lady." The comments piled up underneath. Laughing emojis, cruel phrases, taunts. People were laughing at my wrinkled hands, my simple clothes, my unfiltered words. It was my son who was leading them, who was encouraging them to insult. I felt a sharp punch in my chest. The phone screen blurred with my tears. In that instant, I remembered the day he came into the world. A fragile baby squeezing my finger tightly. I remembered the sleepless nights, the sacrifices, the years of work, sewing, cooking, cleaning other people's houses to pay for his college tuition. All that just to see him now laughing at me in front of an invisible crowd. I sat down in silence. I didn't scream. I didn't cry anymore. I turned off the phone, put it on the table, and took a deep breath. An old picture of Andrew as a child hung on the wall. His arms were around my neck, and he was saying, "I love you, Mama." I felt a hole open up in my soul. I didn't understand when that love had turned into contempt. But before I continue, I want to give you a special invitation. Have you subscribed to the channel and hit like on the video yet? This helps me see that you support me. And enjoy my stories and comment below with which city you are watching us from. Now, let's continue. That night, I couldn't sleep. I closed my eyes and heard the laughter, the mocking voices. I felt small, invisible. Every word of the video burned inside me. But the worst part was thinking that Andrew didn't even do it out of anger. He did it for fun, for followers. The next morning, I went out to buy a bagel and noticed the stares. A couple murmured, "That's the lady from TikTok." I walked with my head down, pretending not to hear, but inside, every step hurt. When I got home, I saw that my son had posted another video. He and his girlfriend Lauren imitating me, pretending that I was scolding them like when he was a kid. Thousands of likes, thousands of laughing comments. I didn't cry that day. Something inside me hardened. I went to the room and opened the old wooden chest where I kept my life documents, the deeds to the house, the contracts for the 2 rental apartments, the savings I'd managed after so many years of work. Andrew always believed everything we had came from an inheritance. But the truth was different. I built it all alone with my hands, my tears, my tired body. I took the papers, spread them on the table, and looked at them calmly, not out of greed, but out of dignity. I remembered my mother's words. "Never hit back with anger, honey. Return the blow with wisdom." That night, looking at myself in the mirror, I swore I wouldn't allow anyone, not even my son, to make me feel less again. I didn't know how or when, but his mockery would come at a price, and it wouldn't be immediate or cruel. It would be fair. I turned on the lamp, opened a notebook, and wrote the first lines of a plan. Not for revenge, but for justice. That kind of justice that life owes to all mothers who break their backs for their children, only to discover one day that those children only learn to laugh at their effort. When I finished writing, I turned off the light and sat by the window. Outside, the moon illuminated the empty street. Somewhere, Andrew was still recording his videos, convinced that I knew nothing. But I did know. And for the first time in many years, I had something he had lost long ago. Silence, strength, and control. I slept peacefully that night, not because I felt vindicated, but because I was no longer afraid. The ridiculous old lady had woken up. The days that followed the video were a relentless punishment. Every time I went to the grocery store or walked toward the church, I felt people's eyes drilling into my back. Some avoided looking at me out of pity. Others whispered between laughs. No one needed to say it out loud. Everyone had seen the ridiculous old lady from TikTok. The greatest pain wasn't the mockery itself, but the loneliness. No one dared to ask how I was, and Andrew didn't show up at the house. I heard from another neighbor that he had been invited to a local show in New York City to talk about his success on social media, and that he even boasted about how he turned everything into content. Even my mom, who was always a character, he said, laughing. The audience laughed with him. I, in front of the television, could only turn it off and stare at my reflection in the black screen. The nights were long. I slept little. Sometimes I opened my phone just to check if the video was still there with millions of views. Every comment was a dagger. The old lady is hilarious. How embarrassing for him. Poor guy having a mother like that. No one knew that this woman they were insulting had cleaned floors, ironed other people's clothes, and gone hungry so her son could have a life she could never dream of. I tried to understand what had happened to Andrew. I remembered the child who hugged me when he came home from school. The young man who told me that everything he did was to give me a better life. Where had that son of mine gone? At what moment did his gaze become cold, calculating, devoid of tenderness? One Sunday leaving Mass, Father Michael took my arm and said gently, "Mary, don't carry this cross alone. God knows a mother's heart can break and still keep beating." I smiled at him, but couldn't answer. Tears burned in my eyes. It wasn't faith I lacked. It was hope. That afternoon, returning home, I found a cardboard box at the door. Inside were my own photos, some torn, others scratched with marker. I recognized my son's handwriting on one of them. It read, "Update your style, Mom. It's not the 80s anymore." I sat on the floor, my hands trembling. For the first time in a long time, I felt rage. A pure, dry rage different from the pain. It was the rage of someone who finally sees the unadorned truth. I didn't cry anymore. I put the photos away carefully and went straight to the room where I kept the document chest. I opened it slowly. There were the deeds, the rental contracts, the papers for the business Andrew thought was his. Everything in my name, all the fruit of my effort. As I arranged them on the table, I understood that power is not in the money, but in the story behind every dollar, and I didn't owe mine to anyone. That night, the silence was different. It no longer hurt. It felt like a new coat. I walked to the hallway mirror and observed myself. The wrinkles that used to shame me now seemed like medals. Each one represented a sacrifice. A battle won. A sleepless night. Ridiculous old lady, I repeated softly. No, Mary, strong old lady. That was the first time I spoke to myself with pride. The days passed, and calm became my ally. Andrew didn't call me, but I saw him online. Expensive dinners, interviews, his girlfriend Lauren showing off new designer bags and trips paid for with collaborations. All of it built upon the humiliation of his mother. I said nothing. I didn't report him. I didn't confront him. I watched him from a distance with the patience of someone waiting for the fire to burn out on its own. One morning, while watering the plants, a neighbor approached. It was Martha, a woman whose tongue was always quicker than her heart. "Oh, Mary," she said, feigning sympathy. "Don't take it so personally. Young people are like that now. You know, they'll do anything for fame." I smiled with a calm she didn't expect from me. "Yes, Martha," I replied. "But some things time collects on its own." She looked at me confused, not understanding. But I understood. That same afternoon, I went to the bank, withdrew a portion of my savings, and began to reorganize my accounts. The teller asked if I wished to keep my son as a beneficiary. I replied with a serene smile. No, not anymore. He chose his own path. I signed the papers without trembling. Every signature was a stitch in a wound. I slept better that night than ever before. Outside it was raining, and the sound of the water against the roof lulled me like an old song. In my dreams I saw Andrew as a child playing with a paper airplane. The plane flew high, but when it tried to come back to me, the wind pushed it far away. I woke up with a certainty. The time had come to let my son face the wind he himself had unleashed. I lit a candle next to the portrait of my late husband and whispered, "I promise I won't cause harm, but I also won't allow them to keep laughing at me. And as the flame danced in silence, I felt something being reborn inside me. Not the desire for revenge, but the strength of dignity. Andrew didn't know it yet, but his game was about to end. The afternoon sun was falling over my. I watched him from a distance with the patience of someone waiting for the fire to burn out on its own. One morning, while watering the plants, a neighbor approached. It was Martha, a woman whose tongue was always quicker than her heart. "Oh, Mary," she said, feigning sympathy. "Don't take it so personally. Young people are like that now. You know, they'll do anything for fame." I smiled with a calm she didn't expect from me. "Yes, Martha," I replied. "But some things time collects on its own." She looked at me confused, not understanding. But I understood. That same afternoon, I went to the bank, withdrew a portion of my savings, and began to reorganize my accounts. The teller asked if I wished to keep my son as a beneficiary. I replied with a serene smile. "No, not anymore. He chose his own path." I signed the papers without trembling. Every signature was a stitch in a wound. I slept better that night than ever before. Outside it was raining, and the sound of the water against the roof lulled me like an old song. In my dreams I saw Andrew as a child playing with a paper airplane. The plane flew high, but when it tried to come back to me, the wind pushed it far away. I woke up with a certainty. The time had come to let my son face the wind he himself had unleashed. I lit a candle next to the portrait of my late husband and whispered, "I promise I won't cause harm, but I also won't allow them to keep laughing at me." And as the flame danced in silence, I felt something being reborn inside me. Not the desire for revenge, but the strength of dignity. Andrew didn't know it yet, but his game was about to end. The afternoon sun was falling over my window when I heard the sound of an engine shutting off in front of my house. I peeked out, and there they were. Andrew with his arrogant smile and Lauren, his girlfriend, getting out of a new car. She wore a tight dress, dark sunglasses, and that air of superiority that had made my stomach turn from day one. He, on the other hand, arrived as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't made his own mother a laughingstock to the world. They knocked on the door without waiting for an answer, and entered as if it was still their house. I was in the living room sewing an old curtain when Lauren approached and said with a fake smile, "Your little house is so cute, Mrs. Johnson. It has that vintage charm." Andrew let out a laugh. "Yeah, the charm of the 70s, he added, looking around. "But don't worry, honey. All this will change soon." I said nothing. I simply continued sewing, as if they were two strangers who had entered my house by mistake, but every word of theirs dug into me like a thorn. Andrew kept talking with that insolent tone he had learned online. "Lauren and I are thinking of moving here while the renovations on the apartment are finished. Besides, you're getting old, Mom. You could use some company." "Company?" I asked without looking at him. "Oh, you mean live-in help?" He shrugged and